The temperature in Las Vegas had dropped to 38 degrees on New Year's Eve, 1964. For a city built on desert heat and neon dreams, it was practically Arctic. The tourists walking down the strip pulled their coats tighter, their breath forming small clouds as they hurried from one casino to another, chasing warmth and luck in equal measure. Inside the Sands Hotel, none of that mattered. The Copa room was a furnace of body heat, cigarette smoke, and anticipation. Over 2,000 people had paid top dollar to ring in 1965 with Dean Martin, the king of cool himself. Champagne was being chilled, confetti cannons were loaded, the orchestra was tuning their instruments, and outside, pressed against the glass doors that separated the glittering lobby from the frozen street, stood a man named Walter Finch. Walter was 53 years old, though he looked 70. His face was a roadmap of hard living, deep lines carved by sun and wind and too many nights sleeping in doorways. His coat was army surplus, patched in 3 places and still not warm enough. His shoes had holes that he'd stuffed with newspaper that morning, though the paper had long since gone soggy from walking through slush. He wasn't trying to get in. He knew better than that. Men like Walter didn't get into places like the Sands Hotel. He was just looking, watching the beautiful people in their tuxedos and evening gowns glide through the lobby like creatures from another planet. For a few minutes, he could pretend he was part of that world. Then security would chase him away, and he'd find a warm vent somewhere to wait out the night. That was the plan anyway. But plans have a way of changing in Las Vegas. Dean Martin arrived at the Sands at 10:30 p.m., 90 minutes before his midnight show. He came through the service entrance as he always did, avoiding the crowds and the cameras. He was wearing a camel haircoat over his tuxedo, a cigarette dangling from his lips, and an expression of profound disinterest in everything around him. "Big crowd tonight, Mr. Martin," his assistant Jackie said, hurrying alongside him. "There's always a big crowd," Dean replied. "That's kind of the point. The network executives are here. They want to talk about the TV special. They can wait. And Mr. Sinatra called. He wants to know if you're coming to his party after the show." Dean took a long drag on his cigarette. "Tell Frank I'll think about it." He wouldn't think about it. He'd go home after the show, pour himself a drink, and watch old westerns until he fell asleep. New Year's Eve was amateur night, a holiday for people who needed an excuse to have fun. Dean Martin didn't need excuses. They walked through the service corridors toward his dressing room. The walls back here were plain concrete, a stark contrast to the glittering opulence just a few doors away. This was the real Vegas, the machinery behind the magic. Dean preferred it back here. Less pretense, less performance. As they passed a side door that led to the lobby, Dean glanced through the small window. And that's when he saw him. A man in a ragged coat, standing at the glass doors, staring in at the lobby like a child at a candy store window. Security was already moving toward him, 2 large men in suits who looked like they bench-pressed tourists for breakfast. Dean stopped walking. "Mr. Martin," Jackie said, "your dressing room is this way." Dean didn't move. He watched as the security guards reached the homeless man. He couldn't hear what they were saying through the glass, but he could read the body language. The guards were aggressive, threatening. The homeless man was backing away, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Something twisted in Dean's chest, a feeling he usually kept buried under layers of cool indifference. "Jackie," he said quietly, "go tell those guards to leave that man alone." Jackie blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The guy at the door. Tell security to back off." "Mr. Martin, he's just a vagrant. They'll handle it." Dean turned to look at his assistant. His eyes were cold in a way that Jackie had rarely seen. "I said tell them to back off, and then bring him to me." "Bring him, the homeless man?" Did I stutter? Jackie swallowed hard. "No, sir. Right away, sir." He scurried off toward the lobby. Dean lit another cigarette and waited. 3 minutes later, Jackie returned with Walter Finch in tow. The homeless man looked terrified, eyes darting around, shoulders hunched, ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. He clearly expected to be arrested, beaten, or worse. Instead, he found himself face to face with Dean Martin. "What's your name?" Dean asked. Walter stared at him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "It's okay," Dean said, his voice softer now. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to know your name." "Walter," the man finally managed. "Walter Finch." Dean extended his hand. "I'm Dean. Nice to meet you, Walter." Walter looked at the hand like it might be a trap. In his world, nobody shook hands with people like him. Nobody treated him like a human being. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and shook Dean's hand. "You got plans tonight, Walter?" Walter almost laughed. "Plans? Mister, I was planning to find a warm spot behind the kitchen vents and try not to freeze to death." Dean nodded slowly. "How'd you like to see a show instead?" "A show?" "My show. I'm performing at midnight. You ever seen a Vegas show, Walter?" Walter shook his head. "I can't afford. I don't have. I'm not asking if you can afford it. I'm asking if you want to see it." Walter looked at Dean Martin, really looked at him, for the first time. He saw the expensive tuxedo, the perfect hair, the casual confidence of a man who had everything. But he also saw something else, something in the eyes that Walter recognized. Loneliness. "Yeah," Walter said quietly. "Yeah, I'd like that." Dean smiled. "Good. Jackie, get this man a seat, front section, and get him something to eat first. He looks like he hasn't had a proper meal in a week." Jackie's face was a mask of barely concealed horror. "Mr. Martin, I can't put him in the front section. The guests, the smell, the management will—" "The management works for the people who pay to see me," Dean interrupted. "And I'm telling you to give this man a seat. You got a problem with that? You can take it up with whoever signs your checks." "Oh wait, that's me." Jackie nodded weakly. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." As Jackie led Walter away toward the restaurant, Dean called out, "Hey, Walter." Walter turned back. "Happy New Year." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Walter Finch smiled. "Happy New Year, Mr. Martin." Word spread quickly through the Sands Hotel staff. Dean Martin had invited a homeless man to his New Year's Eve show. The reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to quiet admiration. The casino manager, a man named Sid Wyman, came storming into Dean's dressing room 20 minutes before showtime. "Dean, what the hell are you doing?" Dean was adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. "Getting ready for my show. What does it look like?" "There's a vagrant sitting in the Copa room. He smells like a garbage truck. The guests are complaining." "Then move the guests who are complaining. Walter stays." Sid's face went red. "Do you know how much those seats cost? Do you know who's sitting in that section? We've got network executives, casino high rollers." "I know exactly who's sitting in that section," Dean said calmly. "I also know that none of them have ever slept on a sidewalk in December. None of them have ever been hungry. Really hungry, not just skipped lunch hungry. And none of them have ever had someone look at them like they were less than human." He turned to face Sid. "Walter has. And tonight, for one night, he gets to be treated like everybody else. If your high rollers have a problem with that, they can get a refund at the door." Sid sputtered. "Dean, the Sands has a reputation. The Sands has a reputation because I fill this room 4 nights a week. Without me, this place is just another casino." Dean's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "Now, you can either go back out there and make sure Walter has everything he needs, or you can start looking for a new headliner. Your choice." Sid stared at Dean for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged. "Fine. But if any high rollers walk out, they won't. And if they do, I'll cover the losses personally." Sid left, shaking his head. Dean turned back to the mirror and finished adjusting his tie. Jackie, who had witnessed the whole exchange, spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Martin, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why? Why does this guy matter so much to you? You don't even know him." Dean was quiet for a moment. His reflection stared back at him. The tuxedo, the perfect hair, the image of a man who had it all. But behind the image was a memory he'd spent 40 years trying to forget. When I was a kid in Steubenville, Dean said slowly, we didn't have much. My father cut hair in a barber shop, made almost nothing. Some nights we didn't eat. Some winters we couldn't afford coal for the stove. He paused. One Christmas Eve, I must have been 8 or 9, my father took me downtown. We walked past this restaurant where all the rich people were having dinner. I pressed my face against the window, watching them eat. Turkey, stuffing, pie. I'd never seen so much food in my life. Dean's voice grew quieter. A man inside saw me looking. He came out, and I thought he was going to tell me to get lost. But instead, he brought me a plate. Turkey, mashed potatoes, the works. He didn't say anything, just handed me the plate and went back inside. He turned to Jackie. I never knew his name, never saw him again, but I never forgot what it felt like to be seen, to have someone treat me like I mattered, even for a moment. He picked up his jacket and slipped it on. Tonight I get to be that guy for Walter. That's why it matters. At 11:45 p.m., Dean Martin took the stage. The Copa room was packed, and the energy was electric. Champagne corks were already popping. Couples held hands. Everybody was ready to say goodbye to 1964 and hello to whatever came next. Dean opened with, "Ain't that a kick in the head?" his voice smooth and effortless. He worked the crowd with practiced ease, hitting his jokes, flirting with the women in the front row, being exactly who everyone expected him to be. But his eyes kept drifting to one particular seat. Third row, center. Walter Finch, wearing a borrowed jacket that was slightly too big, tears streaming down his weathered face. Dean had seen a lot of audiences in his career. Thousands of shows, millions of faces. But he'd never seen anyone look at him the way Walter was looking at him now. Like Dean Martin wasn't just a performer. Like he was a miracle. At 11:55, Dean stopped the music. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we've got 5 minutes until midnight. 5 minutes until we leave this year behind and start fresh. Now, I know you all came here to see me, and don't worry, I'll keep singing. But first, I want to introduce you to someone special." The audience murmured curiously. "There's a man sitting in the third row tonight. His name is Walter. And until about an hour ago, Walter was standing outside in the cold, just trying to stay warm." The murmuring grew louder. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. "Dean, why is there a homeless man at your show?" And that's a fair question. So let me tell you why. Dean paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. Because Walter is the only person in this room who really knows what tonight means. The rest of us, we take it for granted. The champagne, the music, the countdown. It's just another party. But for Walter, tonight is proof that the world hasn't completely forgotten about him, that he's still a human being, that he still matters. The room was completely silent now. So before we count down to midnight, I want to ask you all to do something. I want you to look at Walter. Really look at him. And then I want you to remember that there are thousands of people out there just like him tonight. People who don't have champagne, don't have parties, don't have anyone to kiss at midnight. Dean raised his glass. This next year, let's try to see those people, not as problems to be solved or embarrassments to be hidden, but as human beings, as neighbors, as friends we just haven't met yet. He turned to Walter. "Walter, would you stand up for a second?" Walter rose slowly, shakily, his face a mixture of terror and disbelief. The spotlight swung to illuminate him, this man in his borrowed jacket, with his weathered face and his desperate eyes, suddenly visible to 2,000 strangers. For a moment, nobody moved. And then something remarkable happened. Someone started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire Copa room was on its feet, giving Walter Finch a standing ovation. Walter stood there, tears pouring down his face, overwhelmed by something he had never experienced in his 53 years of life. Acceptance. recognition, love. Dean watched from the stage, his own eyes glistening, though he'd never admit it. "Happy New Year, Walter," he said into the microphone. "Happy New Year, Mr. Martin," Walter whispered, though only those closest to him could hear. At midnight, the balloons fell, the confetti flew, and Auld Lang Syne filled the room. Couples kissed, strangers hugged, and Walter Finch stood in the middle of it all, laughing and crying at the same time, touched by hands that didn't flinch away, welcomed by smiles that saw him, really saw him, for the first time in years. After the show, Dean found Walter in the lobby, still wearing the borrowed jacket, still looking dazed. "How you doing, Walter?" Walter shook his head slowly. I don't understand. Why did you do that? Why me?" Dean lit a cigarette and leaned against a pillar. "You want the truth?" "Yeah. I did it because it was cold outside, and because I remember what cold feels like, and because nobody should be invisible on New Year's Eve." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "There's a hotel room booked for you, paid up for a month, and in this envelope there's some money, enough to get you back on your feet if you're smart about it. There's also a phone number for a guy I know. He hires people for construction work, no questions asked. You call him Monday morning." Walter stared at the envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Mr. Martin, I can't." "You can, and you will. Because here's the thing, Walter. Tonight wasn't charity, it was an investment. I'm betting that you've got some good years left in you, that you can turn things around, that someday you'll be the guy who helps someone else the way I helped you." He took a drag on his cigarette. "Don't make me lose that bet." Walter clutched the envelope to his chest. His hands were shaking. "I won't," he said. "I swear to God I won't." Dean nodded. "Good. Now get some sleep. You've got a lot of work to do tomorrow." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "Hey, Walter, one more thing." "Yeah?" "Happy 1965. Walter watched Dean Martin walk away, disappearing into the bowels of the Sands Hotel like a ghost in a tuxedo. Then he looked down at the envelope in his hands. His ticket back to humanity. He kept his promise. Walter Finch called the number Monday morning. He got the job. Within 6 months he had his own apartment. Within 2 years he was a foreman on a construction crew. He never drank again, never gambled again, never forgot the man who had looked at him when everyone else looked away. Every New Year's Eve for the rest of his life, Walter Finch would find a homeless person and do something kind for them. A meal, a coat, a few dollars, just something to let them know they weren't invisible. "A man did that for me once," he would explain when asked. "The king of cool himself. He saw me when nobody else did. Least I can do is pass it on." Walter Finch died in 1989, surrounded by a family he'd reconnected with after turning his life around. At his funeral, his grandson read a letter that Walter had written years earlier, to be opened after his death. It was addressed to Dean Martin. "Dear Mr. Martin, you probably don't remember me. I was just one face in thousands of crowds you've played to. But I remember you. I remember New Year's Eve, 1964. I remember standing in the cold, invisible to the world, and then suddenly being seen. You gave me more than a room and some money that night. You gave me my dignity back. You reminded me that I was a human being, that I mattered. I've tried to live up to your investment ever since. I hope I made you proud. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for the best New Year's Eve of my life, and for every good year that followed. Your friend, Walter Finch." Dean Martin never saw the letter. By 1989, he had already retreated from the world, broken by the death of his son, living as a ghost in his own life. He died on Christmas Day, 1995, just 6 days before the 30th anniversary of the night he had changed Walter Finch's life. But somewhere, in whatever comes after this world, 2 men who understood loneliness and cold and what it means to be truly seen are probably sharing a drink, laughing about that crazy New Year's Eve in Vegas, toasting to second chances and the power of simple kindness. And maybe, just maybe, Dean Martin finally understands what Walter tried to tell him in that letter. That the coolest thing he ever did had nothing to do with singing or jokes or fame. It was just stopping for one moment to see a man that everyone else had decided not to see. That's the real Dean Martin, not the king of cool. Just a kid from Steubenville who remembered what it felt like to be hungry, and who spent the rest of his life quietly, secretly, trying to make sure others didn't feel that way too. Happy New Year, Dean. Thanks for seeing us.